Welcome back, coaches. We're into day 3 of learning how to use mental performance to optimize your coaching. Hope you're getting a lot from these short videos each day and being able to use them in your training venues. On day 1, we looked at getting your athletes to be able to listen, retain, and execute the information and the coaching that you're giving them. That should make your coaching way more effective. Day 2, yesterday, we looked at the underperforming athlete and what you can do as a coach to be able to bring them up without taking away or detracting from the rest of your team that you're coaching. Today, we're going to talk about motivation, but not your garden variety motivation, like motivating them for a competition or to perform. That's quite easy when there's this outcome that everyone wants. So to do well at a competition, motivation is quite simple. We're going to talk today about is motivation when we've got to go through those tough times where it might be times where we're learning to do new skills or we're learning some routines or some processes. You know, that drudgery of going through session after session after session where keeping your athletes engaged can be really, really challenging. So as a coach, making sure that your athletes are bought in and they're doing these kind of tougher sessions with you and getting the most out of them is obviously, as a coach, we can see the value in that. It's harder to get the athlete to see the value in that. So that's what we're going to talk about today. In order for us to understand motivation, we have to first put into context discipline. Now, as a coach, we think about discipline all the time, right? We talk about they need to be disciplined to do the training, to do all the things required in order to be able to perform at their best. As a coach, it can be really challenging getting them to be that disciplined when there's not that obvious return straight away. But all discipline is a reason to do something. And that reason to do it is greater than the pain or the frustration of not doing it. So if we can sell it to them in a way where, look, you know, if you do this, then you're going to get a much bigger outcome and they buy into that, then they're going to be way more disciplined. Where motivation fits in with that is it's the realization of hitting those disciplined points. So when we think about motivation, it's off the back of that recognition of I've got to be disciplined to do this. And if I do that, then I'm going to get an outcome. So we talk a lot about setting objectives and hitting goals. That's motivating. I said to you on one of our sessions about being teleologic. We need to be able to see a value in what we do. And if we see that value and we hit it, we want to do it again. We release dopamine in our brain and makes us feel good. And we want to hit that again. So those kind of things are really important for us as coaches, being able to set very clear guidelines and objectives for our athletes with our athletes is important. What we tend to see is an athlete in particular, but sometimes coaches too, we can get caught in that cycle of only focusing on seeing a competition or an event as our gauge. But the reality is we need to keep hitting as many things as we possibly can. So we get those dopamine releases. The more dopamine releases we get, the more motivation and momentum we can create with our athletes. So there's a few things that I take my athletes through in order to help with motivation. Number one, we talk about structure. And we heard about Pavlov's dogs. Yeah, he rung the bell. They started to salivate. They knew it was coming. They knew the food was coming. So if we're structured in the way that we recognize and reward, and the athletes know that, then they're almost like Pavlov's dogs. They start to salivate and think, I'm going to hit something. This is going to be really great. I know I'm going to get something really good for this recognition, that kind of stuff. So teaching them to be structured in how they set and achieve success allows them to almost self-moderate that. And so they're starting to get that motivation and momentum on their own. As coaches, we don't necessarily have to hold their hand and guide them through that. So what do I mean by this? As I said to you before, historically, what we tend to do, our objectives are the competitions, the times that we've got to go out there and perform. Most coaches and athletes focus on that as being their primary. I will look at, okay, what's our season objective? Then work backwards from there and break it down and say, 3/4 of the way through our season, where do we want to be? Halfway through our season, where do we want to be? A quarter of the way through our season, where we want to be. So we've got some big, chunky points that we're looking to hit, very key, very specific things. So they're our bigger rewards. They're our bigger targets to hit. But then I look at monthly and say, right, where do I need to be in the end of the month? Now, where do I need to be in a fortnight? Where do I want to be next week? So the more frequent we can put these little points in, and then when we hit them and we recognize and reward, they're like hitting these markers that are just springboarding us onto the next one. The analogy I use with everybody that I do this process with, it's like rock climbing. Now, I've got a friend who's very good and lets me into his rock climbing center with my athletes. And what we do is blindfolded rock climbing. And the whole concept of blindfolded rock climbing is to trust the patterns we got inside our head. But when we're talking about blindfolded rock climbing, or we're talking about any kind of rock climbing, you get speed climbers, right? And they're the ones that will just climb up like a spider on the outside of a wall. And it's all about speed. It's about getting from the bottom to the top as quick as possible. Now, the great thing about speed climbers is speed. The really challenging thing is they don't lock off any point. So there's always this fear, and the higher they go, the more fear there is that they're going to fall. We want to be fast, but we don't want to risk falling all the way back down to the start again and having to start. So what we need to do is have these little springboards along the way, the locking off and rock climbing. So when we hit a certain marker, then we say, right, lock off, right, that's my new platform. Then I grow again. Lock off my platform, I grow again. So that helps us to recognize and reward when we lock off and go, right, now, next springboard to the next one. In having those kind of structures, we've talked about season, and then breaking it down into quarters, breaking it down into a month, and then breaking it down into weeks. I go even smaller than that and say, right, what's my session objective? Where do I want to achieve at the end of this session? Now, what do I need to do to hit that? And those hitting points to get that session are our goals. Why do we call them goals? Every time we score a goal, we cheer and we celebrate. So we want to make sure we hit as many goals as we possibly can. Every single time we do this and we stack the odds in our favor, because there's more goals than there is just trying to hit one at a competition, we start to create that momentum and we move forwards. And an athlete becomes way more motivated to be able to hit the next thing. So recognition, reward, very structured objectives. So we work our way backwards. So from the end of the season all the way back down to individual sessions. We want to get the athlete to journal. So they're recognizing and rewarding themselves. At the end of the day, when they're journaling, they turn around and they say, yeah, I hit that. I did that. That was really good. Cool. I can do that again tomorrow. So as a coach, obviously all of that structure is down to the athlete to do. What we've got to do as coaches is help them understand that that kind of framework is designed to support them. It's designed to motivate them and keep them on track. As a coach, then we can have multiple athletes self-regulating themselves. And then realistically, the only time they come to us, if they'll say, hey, coach, this isn't working, or hey, coach, I'm hitting everything. I need to up the challenge level here so that I'm striving a little bit more. And we can get involved with the nuances of making this work. I see way too many coaches out there. And look, I used to be a coach myself, so I know what this is like, trying to own the motivation for the athlete. Our job is to give them a framework and a platform so that they can create their own motivation. We want them to be able to do everything they need to do, whether we're there or not. My coach, Mitch Fenner, used to have a saying called the red bus theory. And growing up in London, he used to say, if I get hit by a red bus, Dave, it shouldn't affect your career. And what he meant by that is I needed to be self-reliant. And that's something I've taken with me, and I work with every one of my athletes on making sure I've got a red bus theory. Okay, so for us as coaches, it's not about doing it to them or for them. It's about doing it with them. And our role in motivation is teaching them this platform of success. We want to make sure the athlete gets it, understands it, and uses it. If an athlete isn't motivated, it's not our job to dive in there and motivate them. Our job is to dive in there and teach them how to motivate themselves. Hope that's helped a lot of you. And I know, look, coaches are atypically time poor. We've got so many things to do. Getting in there and trying to own the motivation of our athletes is something way beyond we have the time capacity for. So we need to teach them to be able to do it themselves. Hope you've enjoyed this one. It's been motivation is one of those ones I have to work on day to day with teaching coaches. So I hope you've got a lot from that. Tomorrow we're going to look at, do you coach a team? So the team dynamic and the team culture, or do you coach an individual? Stay tuned for that one. Same time, same place. We'll be right here tomorrow. At the end of this week, we're going to have a 45-minute free session for you coaches to ask any question, whether that be a topic we've covered this week or something that's been nagging at the back of you and your coaching that stopped you being the kind of coach you know you can be. So at the end of this week, on Sunday, Australian Standard Time, 5 p.m., we're going to do a Zoom. If you're interested in being part of that, if you really do want to be a better coach and find as little 1%ers, it's going to make your job a lot easier and a lot more effective, then come along to this training. As I say, it's free, no commitment. smartmind.com/coach. Register there so I know how many of you are coming. Hope you got a lot from today. I look forward to seeing you here same time tomorrow, and we're going to look at teams versus individuals. Speak to you then.